Welcome to another episode of BarryTsGarage. I am excited to show you a 1906 Sizaire-Naudin. And actually, I'm going to have Alan get into all the details. It's his car. And you know the saying, you don't know what you don't know? This car might epitomize that slogan or that saying more than anything else. There are so many surprises in this car, and I can't wait to begin showing them all to you. So stay tuned. We're going to have a lot of fun. Okay, Alan, thank you so much for inviting us to come and see your new project at the moment, right? Your new acquisition. Tell us what this car is.
Well, this is about 6 months worth of work so far. Full ground-up restoration of a 1906 Sizaire-Naudin de-course. De-course means race car. It's a Formula One race car. 1906, they decided to have a Formula One, which means single cylinder, and then a lot of rules for that, because 1900 to 1905, the Gordon Bennett race, they got up to 60 or 70 mile an hour with giant 4 and 6 cylinder motors, and then they wanted to curtail that. So this is the first car series for 1906, the Voiturette racing series.
Okay.
And then this car was capable of 60 to 70 mile an hour right off the showroom floor.
Okay, so let's just getting in on the name a little bit, Sizaire-Naudin. Can you tell us what those words mean?
Sizaire-Naudin was two brothers, the Sizaire brothers, and Naudin was their mechanic.
Okay.
And they worked out of a small garage, smaller than my garage here.
Mm-hmm.
And they created X amount of race cars, but they didn't create any for 1906, 7, and 8 touring cars or trucks or family sedans. They only made racing cars, because they wanted to win the Voiturette Racing Series from 6, 7, and 8. Also the Targa Floria in Italy, which they won that too, which is a super famous race.
Okay.
Only useful as a racing car.
There you go.
It didn't even have a gas pedal. It has no butterfly in the carburetor. It's full throttle all the time, and you go.
Okay, well now we're going straight to the good stuff, and that's the mechanical unique items on this. So let's have a look at some of those things.
This is a wooden car. It's metal clad. The suspension is independent front suspension and independent rear suspension. Why? Because they didn't have roads back then they raced on. Targa Floria was actually a worse course than the Baja 1000. Extremely rough and tumble.
Wow.
So cars at the time didn't have, either they were too heavy and they couldn't accelerate from fast braking and turning. Mm-hmm. They couldn't turn. So this is a little bitty car. And it has independent front and rear suspension. So I have one picture where this is in the air 3 feet, because it doesn't have a buckboard wagon suspension with double elliptical. It has fully independent suspension.
There is a speedometer gear on that front wheel.
The speedometer goes to 100 miles an hour. Never could go to 100, maybe downhill.
Yeah.
Or off a cliff, but not. 100. The next thing you see right now is seating arrangement. Right now, it looks like the seating arrangement is normal.
It does. It's 2 kind of bucket seats, right?
But they did every aspect for the Formula One. They analyzed everything possible. So they tried to make the riding mechanician, because all cars at that time had a driver and a mechanician.
Right.
So what they did in this car, they simply created a seating arrangement that made the mechanician ride at a 45-degree angle.
Okay.
So I have Warren, our stand-in slouch today. I'm 6 foot. Warren is at least 7 foot tall.
Yeah, he's a tall man.
So I'm the driver.
Mm-hmm. Where did he go?
So, another racing aspect.
Okay.
The riding mechanician is gone.
Right.
And so is aerodynamic.
Wow, not catching any wind hardly.
Not at all.
That's great.
Next thing is, it doesn't have a transmission. A transmission has insertion loss, back then at least, of 25 or 30%. So it has a rear end, but the rear end has 1 ring gear and 3 pinions in it. So it's direct drive in all 3 gears, first, second, and third. Direct drive. Direct drive means just a ring and a pinion. So we'll show you in one of the next videos that we do, that when I shift this, which is progressive shifting, the drive shaft moves up, down, right, and left as it engages all three of the pinions. It's got an idler gear on.
That is
From a
wild.
racing standpoint.
Wow. Now, we've heard of multi-speed axles before, maybe especially on heavy trucks, they'll have a 2-speed axle.
But that's a transaxle. There's no transmission in this.
But there's no transmission.
There's no other gears. You simply have 3 pinion gears. You have an idler gear that's doing nothing other than reverse.
Yeah.
And you have a ring gear. There's no other gears. It's not a transaxle.
That's wild.
It's all in the back, but there's no transmission. There's no insertion of all those gears and all that loss.
That is crazy.
This is the brake.
Okay. Now, is that a parking brake then? Or the brake?
No, it's a, You just better put on the brakes because it doesn't have that good a brake bar. You have a foot pedal brake and you have that brake. So you have 2 sets of brakes.
Okay.
And they're automatically engaging brakes. So once you put on the brakes, the brake shoe goes in the direction that you're going and clamps tighter.
Oh.
The bad thing is if you stop on a hill, you have no brakes going backwards.
Okay. So it's kind of a one-way wedge action kind of.
It really pretty much. Yeah. So again, back to the Mechanician. The Mechanician runs to the back of the car, lays down, stops the car from rolling backwards. The driver, when it's time, takes off. The riding Mechanician gets back in the slouch position, and we go
So he's either a slouch or a wheel chock.
He did lots of things. And also, you notice I have no gas pedal.
There is no gas pedal, right?
No, because it's full throttle all the time.
Now, wait a minute.
It's full throttle all the time as far as the carburetor is concerned.
Okay.
Okay, but I do have control for the intake valve. This is for valve duration and lift.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
100-mile-an-hour speedometer.
There it is. Look at that. Wow. And let's go ahead and explain.
This is the oiling system.
Uh-huh.
So this is the oiling tank. This is enough for about 275 to 325 miles. And you put normal whale oil in that. This here is for the fuel. And the fuel isn't benzene or gasoline at the time or essence at the time.
Uh-huh.
It was, for the most part, 90% methanol, 10% petroleum ether.
Okay, so how hard would that be to get or fix?
They knew how to get it back then.
They had
it's part of the distillates from oil when they refine oil. It was expensive and it evaporated quickly. And I don't know if you should light these kerosene lamps with them mounted on that gas tank or not.
Wow. And about how much capacity of fluid can you carry in that tank, you think? Is it about 8 gallons maybe or something? 6?
I don't know.
It's rare that Alan doesn't know. He'll know the next time I ask him. All right, so you've got some tools on the floor under the car. So what are you working on right now?
Well, we're gonna work on showing you how the variable cam timing works.
Variable cam timing.
Yes.
And wait a minute, in 1906?
Yeah, it's about 120 years ago. They had variable intake cam timing. And the variable intake cam timing for duration and lift. All of that.
That's crazy.
Before we get there, these are the 4 spare spark plugs. And all these spark plugs are take-apart Renault racing spark plugs from 1904, 1905. So
wow.
On the working end of the spark plug, you have 3 ground electrodes.
Mm-hmm.
And those are all about 16 to 18 thousandths of an inch to the center electrode.
Wow.
Which in lots of cases was platinum. I haven't checked this to see what it is yet because I haven't restored these yet. So these wouldn't foul out very quickly. And on the Firewall, there's a mount for 4 of these.
Wow.
Because it's a single-cylinder motor.
Okay.
It also is a single-cylinder racing motor, so it has a twin fire at the same time, Bosch Magneto. So every time it comes around to fire, it fires a plug on the right side of the engine and a plug on the left side of the engine every revolution. So as you adjust the camshaft, and maybe you adjusted it too quickly and you fouled out a plug, it'll continue to run because at least one side of the engine likely didn't get fouled out. And because the other one is still firing, it will clean out that other plug. And usually within a 20 or 30 seconds, it'll clean the other plug and you'll be firing on both. A couple notes for a twin fire racing engine back then. You didn't have to advance the timing as much for a twin fire Magneto. So maybe you were going to put it to 35 degrees if you had 1 spark plug. You can advance it only to 25 degrees with twin spark plugs because the flame has got to go less distance.
Right. Okay.
And how is that an advantage? By advancing your timing less, and by not having control of your timing, you have more torque.
Right.
Because you haven't advanced the timing beyond the torque curve of the motor. So it gives you 20%, 30% more torque by having twin fire. Mm-hmm. And on the high end, you probably get another 15% more power on the high end, as well as it takes care of it if you foul out a plug.
Interesting. Wow, they really thought a lot of this through. Again, for racing, you're going to think about all these details. And we'll have to get to the racing record because these guys weren't slouches racing. They won a lot. Okay, so there we're seeing the twin spark plugs that you were mentioning. And there's where the 4 spares can reside. Okay.
This is pretty thick Muntz metal.
Okay.
So Muntz metal is what they used on the Cutty Sharp ship from the 1850s, 1860s.
Okay.
So it's a real high-tech material. It's kind of like brass, it's 60% copper, 40% tin.
Okay.
Very special kind of metal. Battleships used it in the 1800s.
Okay.
It was a very, very strong brass-type material.
Okay.
Anti-corrosive material.
Okay.
So that's Muntz metal.
Kind of gives you a layer between the engine and the tank.
So that's kind of a firewall in real terms.
Yeah.
And as a racing engine, it doesn't have any need for a fan or a water pump.
Okay.
Because this is not a parade car.
Right.
This was normally push started. And then once it got push started, it was racing.
So that means air was moving through it.
Yeah. So it was not lollygagging around. It was moving down the road. And if you're going to move down the road, you're not going to use it to haul your family or go 10 mile an hour. You don't need a fan. You don't need a water pump. So it's more efficiency, more power because you're not driving those two items.
No water pump either?
No, it's thermosiphon. Thermosiphon means the engine heats up the water.
Yep.
So the engine takes the water, heats it up. It comes out the top of the engine. And this output piece of tubing goes up.
Okay.
Goes up into the top of the radiator. Thermosiphoning, hot water rises, is cooled, and recirculates.
So as it cools, it sinks down. The cooler water's at the bottom,
Yes.
ready to take it up again.
So you didn't need. So there's almost every aspect of this points to it as a race car, which is what it was.
Okay.
Even though it might just be a pretty looking little antique car, it's a pretty potent little car.
Interesting. I see a pretty unusual linkage and springs and things going on here. What is that about, if you don't mind explaining that?
This operates the camshaft.
It operates the cam.
Yeah.
So you're moving the cam from the steering wheel.
Right. And that is on here. It's in the engine right now.
Okay.
That's moving this piece back and forth, which is this piece. I'm moving the intake cam back and forth with the steering column inside of the engine.
Okay, we're seeing a bump there on the right side from this angle.
Yeah.
Tell me let's explain what a cam is and how that works and why this is so amazingly different from what we would normally see.
Okay. This push rod is the intake valve, rocker assembly.
Okay.
This is the intake valve right here.
Okay.
With the roller bearing on top of it. And this pushes up and down.
Okay.
Can you see it move?
Yeah, it's moving for sure.
Okay. So this is moving up and down. It's the intake valve.
Okay, right.
And this intake valve is hooked to a variable camshaft.
Yep, okay.
So during the time that we're running the motor, the driver with this control can adjust the intake valve lift to 50 thousandths of an inch up to half an inch of lift from the steering column to gain his advantage. So the throttle of the car is virtually completely controlled by the intake valve lift and duration.
Wow, that is just wild. It's fascinating.
Here's the intake cam, and this intake cam, as I showed you before, moves back and forth based on where the driver has the sector on the steering wheel.
Yep. Okay.
Okay? Now, I'm going to take this intake cam off. If this was a normal old car, it would have an intake lobe and an exhaust lobe. The intake lobe on an antique car of this era might look like this configuration.
Yep, that looks familiar.
It'd be similar on the ramp going up and going down, and would have a small amount of lift. And this is how an engine would run. A normal engine back then would run with this.
The profile, let's say.
Yeah, with this profile.
Yeah.
But this is a racing car.
Yeah.
And this is adjustable. So the on this ramp from here to here is where the intake valve would reside. So
by sliding it, the pickup or the valve push rod is going to stationary, but you're sliding that relative to the push rod.
Correct.
And so that's bringing more lift as you slide it further along.
I am. And you notice the ramp is more and more and more, the more accelerate on the steering column.
Yeah, right.
And the neat thing is, you know, this is from a racing standpoint. That's a good profile.
Sure.
But you don't have adjustment of it.
No, right.
You know, it'd probably be like this. But the interesting thing about this piece of metal is this cam profile is in the first 10% of the throw on the sector in the steering column, which is similar to all cam profiles for 1904, 1905, 1906.
Right.
But as soon as you advance it to here, you see the camshaft is advanced by a lot.
Yeah.
The lift is a lot more.
Yeah.
It goes from a putt to a racing car.
Yeah.
It turns into a bull taco racing motorcycle over here.
Right.
So by having the profile the way it is, it allows it to have a lot of torque at low end and run like an old car and idle maybe like an old car. But as soon as you jump off of this ledge to here, you're advanced the camshaft and it is a racing car.
And I'm noticing the center of the height profile is offset. It's different.
It's advancing the cam from the mediocre cam profile of the antique car. And here it becomes a racing car.
That's wild. I have never seen anything like that at all. Not even close.
Yeah. And then also this car has so much compression, if you just mindlessly put that anywhere, you can't crank start the car. You can't push start the car.
No kidding.
So the only place you can do that, and because it has full timing all the time and full throttle all the time, you, on your sector, on your steering wheel, you adjust it so that the intake valve is sitting right here. Okay. Which is not much lift, maybe 100,000th of an inch of lift.
Okay.
So you're not building that much compression. Right. So you can therefore use the hand crank. And it could idle, even though it's full throttle, it'll idle because it's only got 50,000ths or 75,000ths of an inch of lift.
Right. So it's only letting that much air fuel mixture in.
It's also a good theft deterrent because nobody could ever figure out that it has this to just start it.
No kidding. That is fascinating. Wow, that's one for the books right there.
One kind of fun thing is, fun fact, this car spins counterclockwise.
Oh, okay.
The production cars they made later all spun clockwise. This engine, because of how the camshaft is designed, you can pull this off, since it's square, turn it over 180 degrees, put it back on, and it'll spin the other direction. Hard to do going down the road. You've got to take the engine apart. Right. But you could.
You could.
So why'd they have the race cars? Because that makes the rear end upside down too, which gives it a lot more ground clearance. Oh. I think that's
it's a good guess, huh?
They did that.
Yeah. Well, in a future episode, we're going to study the rear axle and that whole transactional business. That is another completely wild story. Well, Alan, thank you so much. I think we're going to drop it there. We're going to stop the video at this point because you're in the middle of rebuilding this, and we're going to come back later, folks, and see how this all looks, all put together.